Good morning and welcome back to the Closers Inner Circle podcast with your host, Denise Griffitts and Ben Gay III. Today we're diving into week 8 of what we're calling our multi-part Sales Infiltration free masterclass. We didn't really plan it that way, but we've gone through this chapter before. We did it about a year ago, and we've had so many questions about it and so many people wanting to know more that we decided to do it as a masterclass this year. So you will find this chapter in the closers part 2, beginning on page 257. And it's a big chapter. It's the biggest in the book. And Ben will tell you he thinks it's the most important chapter in the book in so many ways. So if you're just joining us, you might be wondering how important is it to go back and catch up on the earlier episodes. It's important. We'll discuss how those first few weeks, excuse me, laid the foundation for advanced techniques like sales infiltration and why mastering the basics is key. Key, write that down, to high-level sales success. But before jumping into week 8, take a moment to catch up on weeks 1 through 7, and you can find them anywhere. You can go to your Partner in Success Radio. You can just type in the Closers Inner Circle podcast on Google. You're going to find us. And you'll find the links in the podcast, excuse me, the podcast show notes. So this is important to further maximize your learning and sharpen your skills, your sales skills. Make sure the Closers Part 1 and Part 2 are part of your entrepreneurial library. These books are must-have companions to this series of conversations, and they offer in-depth knowledge that will help you apply the strategy shared by Master Closer Ben Gay III. He's been doing this for a long time. These books are literally known as the sales Bibles across the world. Ben, good morning. It's Wednesday. I'm losing my voice. You get to do all the talking. Woohoo.
Yeah, easy for you to say.
Oh, yeah? What did I say? I've
Good,
already forgotten.
good morning. Been looking forward to this, as always, on Wednesdays. I don't know when they're listening to it, but we do it on Wednesdays, and it's my favorite day of the week.
I am not getting in the way of that. I did it last week. You tell him why.
Well, I get to do two things on Wednesdays. Well, one, I'm very anal and regulated, and I follow the daily success system Dr. Napoleon Hill taught me years ago. So there's certain things I do on certain days, and they're all on the calendar and moved up for a year in advance. I trim my toenails on every fifth, I think it is, Saturday. I take the trash out every Wednesday, and immediately after getting that done, I hop on the phone with Denise. So taking out the trash and doing Denise's show are both highlights of Wednesday. Plus, it of course is Hump Day. I've never quite understood that because,
Me either. I don't
yeah,
get it.
well, I'm like you. I'm in a 24-hour, 7-day a week
Yeah.
business. It
What's this
slows
whole work?
down on the weekends because the
Right, right.
customers slow down.
Yeah, but I keep hearing work-life balance. It's all the same thing.
Yeah,
I don't have a work or a life. It's all day, every day. And most nights I don't sleep very well. So,
you'd rather be reading, as you posted something this
did you
morning
see
about
that?
that.
I
Yeah.
looked at Kindle sent me a little note and said I basically read about 10 books a month, which I knew, but that doesn't cover the hard copy books that I also read. I've got, like you, I've got books everywhere. So, that's 10 a month. I'm sorry, 10 a month, I guess is okay, but that's really not much for me.
Well, that's impressive for most people. I used to know the statistic because I used it in classes, in seminars, but it's something like the average American reads a book a year,
Oh, no,
but
no.
the mean average is most Americans, or the average American, never again reads a full book cover to cover after they get out of school and don't have to.
No, that's too bad.
Yeah, I don't understand that.
No, I don't either. That's my one of my biggest joys in life is reading and drawing pictures in my head. When
Mhm.
you're reading a good book, and I just wrote an article about that yesterday, I think it was about when you're talking to your podcast guests, when you're trying to get them to come pay attention to you or the audience to come pay attention to you, you have to hit all of their senses. And one of my most important sentences, mind pictures, and I know you do the same thing.
Yeah. Word pictures, mind pictures are
All
really
right.
important. And I'm known as a pretty good storyteller, but the way I am a pretty good storyteller is I read. I read
Hmm.
magazines or I scan magazines. Aren't many that are worth reading, but I at least scan them and maybe tear out an article or two. Tore out one for Gigi this morning. Did you know that Velveeta cheese has no cheese in it? None.
It's not cheese.
Yeah,
It's
it's something. It started out cheese because it was the leftovers off of other
right.
rounds of cheese and so on. But then some chemist figured out a better way to do it, and over the years it evolved. It has zero cheese in it.
Right.
I get
That's why
that's
it's
not,
sitting in a box on a shelf.
yeah, that's the tip off right there.
Right. But it's yummy. It's good
The
for cooking.
expiration date on Velveeta cheese is whenever you found this.
I happen to like it, but
Yeah,
I cook
yeah,
with
I
it.
do too. I'm
Yeah,
not
it
trying to
makes
be a
good.
snob about it, but
No,
it's just interesting that there's no
no
cheese.
cheese. Yeah, I've always,
Not a little,
but it
not,
makes good non-cheese grilled sandwiches. So it's,
but I wouldn't know that if I
yeah,
hadn't read
seriously?
some magazine recently, Smithsonian or something, had a little one-page article about it. I've heard that, but I didn't believe it. I thought, well, that's an exaggeration. Of course it
Nope.
has cheese in it. Nope.
Nope. I don't know what's in it. I don't want to know.
Yeah,
It's just
I'm going to refuse the opportunity to
yeah,
read the ingredients
good. Don't
next time.
share. I don't need to know because
Somebody
then
said
that'll take care of my what.
never eat anything when the ingredients, when you can't pronounce the ingredients.
Yeah, I know. But if I had to know what was in it, and I've studiously avoided knowing what's in it, my casseroles would just go off the menu because there's no point. Even taco soup, I put Velveeta in there to kind of creamy it up a little bit. So it's got its uses, I'm telling you. So this we covered a lot of territory last week, and this week you told me that you're going to share stories about some of the notable, very, very notable people that you've worked with, including J. Douglas Edwards. I think we talked a bit about him last week. William Penn Patrick, he pops up a bit. And my favorite, Zig Ziglar. And we'll also talk about what to do when a sales presentation goes off track, and they do, and how to get it back on course. And if we have time, we'll break down, we being, of course, you, I'm using the royal we, we'll break down why using customers' names and building rapport can make a huge difference in sales interactions. It can make a huge impact rather when you're just talking to somebody on the phone and you want them to fix your bill. They're not going to like you if you're not nice to them. And if you
Absolutely.
don't know their name, I'm telling you right now.
And the sweetest sound in the English language or any language, I
Right.
assume,
Your own
is
voice.
their name.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
it just personalizes it somewhat. With you, I don't have to do it. Of course, I have a logo up on my computer screen right now that comes up automatically when we talk. It says Denise Griffitts, Nerd
Right.
in
And
Stilettos.
stilettos. Yeah.
So I don't have to put up a note. But when I'm talking to somebody on the phone and I think it's going to be more than a quick casual conversation or a podcast or something, I write their name on a sticky note and stick it right beneath the camera for two reasons. So I won't forget their name. I'm not real good with names naturally. And B, as a reminder to use it. Uh, to say, Denise, that's a great point. And the most important part of that sentence is to you, Denise.
Unless
So,
you overuse it, which people do.
oh yeah, yeah.
Once I start hearing my name over and over again, I'm like, oh, geez. Did I ever tell you, Ben? Did I ever tell you how I became known as Denise Griffiths, Nerd and Stilettos? Did I ever share
Yeah.
that with you? Well, my podcast, Your Partner in Success Radio, is 17 years old enough to drive a car or have a debutante ball. Haven't worked it out. And years ago, was having this wonderful conversation with a delightful man, and he kind of had me, back on my heels. He said about the middle of the conversation, he said, Denise, what is it that you do? I just went, I don't know because I'm the one asking the questions. It's my microphone, and he just stopped me cold, and I had to stop and think. I said, "Well, I heard cats. I've got cats and a dog, so I heard cats. I'm a web developer. I have a computer science degree that nobody cares about but me because I had to pay for it and earn it. And my closet looks like Nordstrom's threw up in there. I own stilettos like you would not even credit." He said, so I said, "I guess I'm a nerd in stilettos." He said, "Say that again." And fortunately, I remembered what I had said. I don't always. And I said, "I guess I'm a nerd in stilettos." He said, "Call me when this show is over." And I always do anyway to say thank you. So I called him and he kind of gave me a little, hard time about why I wasn't branding such a great description. And here's the thing, when the publicist for the Academy Awards tells you to do something, you do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's how I got that. It wasn't my idea.
Well, it's good. Very few things. I'm known for several things, sayings or this or that or achievement. None of them started with me. Somebody wrote one time, and I loved it. They said, when the Bible was completed and Shakespeare died, it was done. The rest of us have just been moving words around. And one of my things I'm really known for, or about half the world knows me for it, the other half believes somebody else said it, is
No
the
like and trust.
yeah, people like to deal
Yeah.
or buy from people they know, like, trust, and with whom they feel safe. That's been added in the last few years by Rob Anspach and me in a casual conversation, but know, like, and trust was the original one. And I blurted that out in the seminar spontaneously 50 years ago, and then somebody else uh, made it even more famous in a book. And there are people who argue on the internet about whether it was mine or his. What difference does it make? But let's assume it was mine since it predated his book by 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
I didn't make that up.
No, but you
It
said
was,
it.
yeah, it was words that I had heard and things I had read and surmise. It's a compilation until I come up with a brand new word, a sentence made up of words no one ever heard before. Everything else came from somewhere else. So one of the benefits, here's a sales infiltration tip. One of the benefits of acknowledging that is you look, if you say, so and so said this, almost every Facebook post I send out, and I send out one a day, almost every one contains a quote to which I attribute the person who said it allegedly and the person who told me they said it allegedly. It makes me look gracious. It says subtly to people, I read. You know, I actually look through books and look for things and highlight them and so on, and that I'm connecting with greater authorities, higher authorities. I say and do a lot of things that Dr. Napoleon Hill taught me, and I usually give him credit unless it's just become so deep a part of me that I don't even remember where it came from. Uh, I don't give my mother and father a lot of credit for things they said or did because it's been part of me for so long, I sort of forgot that. It is me. And but giving credit to other people when deserved makes you look smarter, kinder, better read, etc., and gives credibility. If I say whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe and so on, some people roll their eyes and go, "Oh yeah," unless they're crazy. Uh, but if I say, as Dr. Napoleon Hill told me in person and wrote in Think and Grow Rich, now you have credibility. I don't care who gets the credit, as long as it gets passed on to people. That's the real message. It's
Right. And a
passing
lot
on.
of people get credit for that particular phrase, a lot.
Hmm. Yeah.
But
Uh, the
he
uh,
was the guy, he was the man.
the I think I may have told you this before, but I think either the first day I met him or the day afterwards, it was our first lunch together at a little restaurant on the water in San Rafael, California. he turned to me, I guess he thought I hadn't read the book, and said, "You know, Ben, whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve." And I said, he was eating a salad at the time. The fork was right to his mouth as he was talking, and then he was going to take the bite. And I said, "Unless he's crazy." And
Every
the
time you
fro
tell me that story, I can see it in my head.
yeah, the fork froze in midair. As probably also told you, Dr. Hill was not used to being uh, contradict, and that was our first or second day of knowing each other, and the earlier one had already started. When I said, "Dr. Hill, it's a pleasure to meet you," he said, "Call me Nappy." And I said, "Well,
Mm-mm.
that's never going to happen." He was 84. I was 25, I think. And he was a doctor, was an honorary doctorate, but nevertheless, he was a doctor. He was old enough to be my great grandfather, and you don't call your great grandfather Nappy. You don't call a great grandfather Nappy.
No.
So we started on the Nappy argument, and that went on for 2.5 years until he died. And then, but on you become what you think about. Excuse me, that's Earl. On whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe it can achieve. On that one, we had a little discussion backwards and forth, and I said, "Well, you know, the mental institutions of the world are filled with people who believe they're Napoleon or Jesus or whomever." So I mean it when I say whatever the mind of man can conceive, unless he's crazy or it's crazy. And he said he never did it. If I ever rewrite Think and Grow Rich, I'm going to add that. He admitted it
Oh,
had some merit.
it does. Go look at Twitter these days.
Mhm.
It's horrifying. It really is. And people genuinely believe, and I'm not going to call anybody out or any gender out, but there's a lot of issues going on right now with people who are just determined that there's something they clearly are not. And if that's not mental illness, I don't know what to tell you.
Uh, it's a form of it,
Yep,
for sure.
it is. It,
Well, let me touch on a couple of things that came up during the week, and I have notes on them. And then we'll start down the list and do three or four if you'd like, of the people that everybody's heard about, but very few of us who are alive got to meet. One, this is sort of a joke, but I made a note and I don't want to lose my note. Uh, Somebody in our organization, this is years ago in a different organization, came up with an idea, a contest. It was just within the home office staff, that if you did this and this and so on in 7 days, the prize was you got a dinner, private dinner with Mr. Gay. Johnny Hyde, who worked for me, he was the famous disc jockey who was the first one to play Beatles music in the United States and was the producer of Monster Mash, the song we all hear at Halloween, and Wipeout, one of the great drum songs of all time. He has had gold records for both of those. And he was a good friend and the biological father of one of my stepsons. So he was at the house a lot. He didn't have to put on airs with me or vice versa. He was that guy Napoleon Hill said, always have a person or two around you who will tell you the absolute truth and without retribution. They don't tell you the absolute truth and you fire them. Have people like that. Well, I had several over the years. I'm married to one now. But Johnny Hyde was one, and a wonderful gentleman named Cheryl Shoemate who just passed away. He was sort of my Ed McMahon to my Johnny Carson. And he could correct me live in a seminar. I would say something, he'd stand up, he'd say, "What Mr. Gay meant to say was," and he would correct me in front of 5,000 people or whatever. And everybody got a big kick out of it, and he was usually right. But on the you win a dinner with Mr. Gay, somebody said in the audience, "What's second prize?" And Johnny said, "Two dinners with Mr. Gay." which I guess was sort of insulting. I'm not sure. But every time it crosses my mind, it makes me smile all these years later. And then another note I made during the week, uh, I was talking to somebody and they said, give us an example. You always talk about if you have a built-in objection, bring it up first and brag about it. That's written in Sales Closing Power, the book I wrote for J. Douglas Edwards after he died. But it's true to him because I took it from the notes I made working with him and knowing him and from his recordings. So it's as if he wrote it, he just never got around to writing the book. But the main lesson, there's several that he's really famous for. One from the book, when you ask a closing question, shut up. And in real life, he would scream it. I mean, shake the rafters in the meeting room, hold the microphone up close to his lips. When you ask a closing question, shut up. The other one that he's famous for that I really love is when you have a built-in objection, bring it up first and brag about it. With that in mind, I'm doing a seminar somewhere, and this nice gentleman comes up to me. He's got the turban thing going on his head and sort of a robe. I don't know what it's officially called, a white robe. And he said, I'm selling whatever it was, cars, timeshare, I really don't know. He said, but I'm having a difficult time. Do you have any suggestions for me? Or could you guess what the problem might be? And I said, yeah, you look like a terrorist. To the uneducated person who doesn't know one sect from another sect and the beliefs of each one and so on, you put a turban on your head and a robe, you rather quickly, to an uneducated person like me, drop over into the better watch my back category because of what's going on currently. So I said to him, yes, you look like a terrorist. And he said, well, what am I going to do about that? He said, I'm not one of them. I'm a Sikh. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's Sikhs. He said, I'm a,
Right. I was hoping that's how you were going to identify him because they are very peaceful people.
yeah. He said, we're the good guys. We're very peaceful, etc. He said, how do I bring that up? And I say, right, hello, my name is. They give you their name and say, before we get started, let me assure you, I am not a terrorist.
I'm
I'm
a
a
good
Sikh.
guy.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm a Sikh. We're
Right.
the gentle good people. And he said yes. And I can't give you figures, but he directly or indirectly contacted me months later. His sales had tripled. The problem went away. Nobody looked uneasy anymore. So, if you've got a third hand growing out of the side of your head, mention it. It makes it handier to pick up things, whatever. But acknowledge it, get it out in the open, and say, I understand this. So you don't have to sit there wondering, does he know he looks like a terrorist? Does he know I can't afford the Rolls Royce? Does he know, whatever? And I told you, British Motors years ago in San Francisco, they were having trouble. And what it really was they were wasting time with people who didn't have a remote chance of buying a Rolls Royce. So we put a thing in there, you have a built-in objection, bring it up first and brag about it. You go over, and if you don't know them, if they just wandered in, you go over and you go, hi, my name is Ben Gay. How are you? Blah, blah, blah. And I said, isn't that a beautiful car? They're looking at the silver cloud or whatever. Yes. One of the great things, Mr. Prospect, about working in this job is I get to meet people every day who are in a position where they can invest $350,000 in a beautiful automobile like that. And then you just stare at them closely. If their pupils, dilate or they spit up in the back of their throat, uh, probably that's not your person. But you
No,
got
you
it
need
out
to
in the open.
pre-qualify them.
Yeah, you get it out and not prejudged, but pre-qualified
Right.
is
Right. It's a
right.
big difference.
Yep. Uh, you know, do we understand before you sneak a peek at the window sticker, this is a $350,000 car? And that was a long time ago. I don't know what they are now. I've only bought two Rolls Royces and they were both to give away as prizes. I never rode in either one of them. So but it's a great qualifier. We have a built-in objection here. Price. Let's get it right out in front and talk about it. Or the alternative is to waste an hour talking to a person who doesn't have $3.50, never mind $350,000, and then they're waiting for you to drop the price. You're afraid the subject's going to come up, but the hour is already wasted. They can't
Right,
they
right.
can't buy, and I know, everybody could buy if they're properly motivated. That's one of my phrases. Sufficiently inspired, just about anybody can raise just about any amount of money. But
Well, and I wanted,
I can tell you from personal experience, no one is going to get sufficiently inspired to go from broke to a $350,000 car
no,
in one conversation. Not going
not
to
without talking to their father-in-law or something.
happen. Yeah.
But I wanted to go back to what we were talking about, pre-qualifying, prejudging. Look, I live in the oil field country, Cajun country.
Mhm.
And I had a friend years ago, I know I shared this with you, but he was just a grubby guy. He owned the company. He owned this huge oil field company, but he was always covered in, mud. He was
Yeah.
coming off those rigs, that oil mud gets all, he was just dirty looking all the time. He wasn't, but he was oily looking and he was loud and he was Cajun and he was crude. And I loved him. He was the neatest kind of guy. And he was out of town because everybody here knew him. But he went to buy, I can't remember now if it was a Bentley or a Rolls, but it was used and he only paid $250,000 for it. So it was
Oh
used.
yeah. Shabby,
Yeah.
shabby
And
old Rolls.
right. And they did not want to give him the time of day until he whipped out his checkbook. So I said,
Not,
"Did you leave?" He said, "No, I wanted that car, but I came close."
yeah.
I would have
And he wasn't
left.
referring other people in the future
Well, and
back to them.
I didn't even think about that. But yeah, when he talked about that company, it wasn't with fondness. So not that I was going to go buy one of these vehicles, but I knew to steer clear if
Yeah.
I ever did want one.
The not of the magnitude of your story, but a similar lesson. I was working at Macy's fresh out of high school, and I was working in the camera and sporting goods department. Only Macy's could lump those two together because their theory was we can train you to sell, therefore you can sell anything. So those two departments sat side by side, and the salespeople, me included, floated between them. I come up the escalator onto the floor. There's a guy standing in front of the camera display, overalls, sounds like your guy. Overalls, sort of look, I don't remember mud so much as he looked dusty. I thought if I hit him on the back, a puff of something would come out. And then behind him, about 20 feet away, was another guy in a three-piece suit, looking good, hair done properly and everything. So my little brain, I looked at the two of them. I went, okay, there we go. And I went over to the guy in the 20 feet away, but in the sporting goods department, said, hi, can I help you? Well, after 30 or 40 minutes, he bought a the cheapest football helmet we had and a pair of shoulder pads made out of compressed cardboard for his son.
Oh,
You have to go back and sort of decompress, do inflation in reverse. I
right.
don't think the sale came to $10 total, but we'll call it 20. And then I filled out the paperwork, put it in those little pneumatic tube things, shot it up to the credit department because he wanted to put it on the credit card. And 5 minutes later, thump, the tube came back down. For you younger people, you probably don't know what I'm talking about, but that was the computer of its day. You shot through a vacuum tube, a pneumatic tube, your credit inquiries to the credit department 3 floors away, like a rocket ship, and then it came back and you twisted it, opened it up with their answer or approval or what have you. Anyway, his $20 helmet and shoulder pads was turned down.
Oh,
Meanwhile,
ow.
a friend of mine whose name was Hart Bro had wandered onto the floor, and the only person standing there was the guy in front of the camera department uh, with his dusty overalls and all. And Hart said, "How can I help you?" And I didn't hear it all, but I heard later the guy said, "Yes, I'd like this and this and this," and pointing to specific things he knew. He knew his business. I guess he was an amateur or maybe even professional photographer. He spent $1,500, which doesn't sound like a lot of money today, but let's keep in mind this was 1961. So he spent $15,000 or more, depending on how you figure inflation rates, 15,000 or more. And all he was waiting for was somebody. He didn't need to know my knowledge of cameras. I had very little. He didn't need to know apertures and all that stuff, of which I just still couldn't spell it. I'm not sure what it means. He just wanted this one and this one and this one and so on. And he had it, part of it had to be delivered a special order or whatever. But he walked out from the time Hart encountered him to when he left was less than 10 minutes. I spent
Wow.
the better part of an hour selling $20 worth of shoulder pads that didn't clear. That's an example of prejudging. And
So you might have made 10 cents an hour or so.
yeah,
But you're talking about those pneumatic tubes. My favorite town in the great state of Louisiana is Natchitoches, and it's the oldest settlement in this part of the country. It's very, very old. And I go there at least once or twice a year. And the hardware store over there is the original hardware store, and they use those. They've got the original giant cash registers. They've got the
oh
pneumatic
yeah,
tubes. I look, anytime I'm going to go there, and I tend to spend a couple of days at a time, I'm going to spend an entire day in that store. It's just wonderful. It
we
really
have one
is.
here called Placerville Hardware. It's the
Eh,
oldest hardware store west of the Mississippi. And in the wooden floors, when you walk on them,
yep.
they creak
Yeah.
and all that stuff. And the
Same thing.
ladders that are attached to the wall, and you can roll them back and forth because you need something from the 10th shelf up on top. And the customers don't use them, but the people do. My father-in-law, Gigi's father, went in there one day. They had just bought a house, which is one of the landmark houses here in Placerville, California. And he was doing that, what do you call it, up near where the wall and the ceiling comes together, that wooden thing that covers
The
the crack.
molding, crown
Yeah,
molding.
molding. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
thinking of another name, but molding. And so he had a section of it cut out because he wanted to replace 20 feet of it or something. And he goes into Placerville Hardware, which was old then. And he holds up the thing, and the guy says to him, "Oh, Mr. Ronzoni, how are you? You might," and he looks at the molding and he says, uh, "You must have bought the Burger House." He said, "Yeah, I did. Can you tell that from the mold?" He said, "Yeah, I told him when he bought the molding uh, that he was going to need more of it, but he wouldn't listen to me. Pulls the ladder over, scampers up the ladder, top shelf, pulls down. He said, "How much you need?" And Mr. Ronzoni, Joe Ronzoni said, "About 20 feet." And he says, "Well, that's in luck. That's the amount I saved. So I have 20 from 40 years ago."
Oh my goodness.
He hadn't saved it. He would have sold it if somebody'd asked for it, but nobody did for 40 years. He knew
Right.
right where it was. First glance, he knew it came from the Burger House. So that's knowing your inventory, caring about your people. Uh, it was and not prejudging, I guess.
Right. And it does make a difference. Mine, I was telling you, it's a hardware store. It's the Cafe Frederick General Mercantile Store, and it's Louisiana's oldest general store. It's fabulous. But every time, and I only go in there about once a year, they always say, "Hey, how are you doing?" They know exactly who I
Yeah,
am.
yeah,
They know I'm going to want cast iron. They know until my brother passed away, I was going to be in the toy store, the toy section. because I mean, I found him, what do you call those cap guns? I filled a stocking for him, cap guns and a little sheriff's badge. I just did all the things that he had when he was a kid. And I called my mom. I said, "Guess what I found?" And she's like, "Oh my God." She's like, "Buy it, buy everything." And I pretty much did. But, places like that, because they know you, because they like you, and they know what you want. They may not know immediately. They know I'm going to look at all the cast iron. They just know. But they know what their customers want. They know who their audience is, so to speak. And very little changes in that store. Very little. It doesn't need to.
The flip side of that, and I don't mean to damn Walmart because they certainly are successful, but Gigi was at Walmart's the other day and got frustrated. I don't know what she was buying, but everything was behind a lot glass sliding door.
Yeah, yeah, that's
And
happening a lot.
and the first guy, she said, "Could you open this up? I want to buy this." He said, "I'm busy doing something else right now. Ask her," and pointed to somebody 30, 40 feet away. And she was telling me the story, and I said, "And you stayed?" You know, and then when she gets up to the checkout counter, it was either the person who bags things or the checker herself. Somebody, Judy said, uh, getting these was a real pain, and I almost walked out. And one of them, the bagger or the checker, said, "We don't care."
Oh,
Can you
no.
imagine that?
No, I can't. Look, I'm surprised Gigi stayed. I would have marched my butt off to find a manager, and I have been known to do so. And
That's
then
not her nature.
oh, it's in my nature. And I grab them
Yeah,
by the ear or the whatever I have to grab, and I haul them off with me. If I'm
I
going to make a scene, it's going to be a good one.
and I may not look for the manager. I figure out where intercoms are, and I just pick them up and make total store announcements. We have a problem on aisle 4
Yeah,
or
and his
check
name is
stand
Bernie,
7.
and he's a brunette, and he's four
Yeah,
foot two.
I love to hear my voice on a megaphone anyway, so it
Oh
gave
my
me an
God.
excuse. So anyway, oh, one more, and this is from just the other day. If you want to, if a couple of days ago, depending on when you're listening to this, President Trump had the Day of Liberation or something where he announced a whole bunch of new uh, penalties if you're not treating us fairly. And this isn't political. I don't care what side any listener's on, and you don't know what side I'm on. I'm just saying it was billed as an important announcement that would affect the United States and the world economy to a degree for years to come. That's the way it was billed. So I stopped everything I was doing at 1 o'clock our
I did
time.
too. I
Yeah,
did too. I ran
yeah.
for the TV and turned it on, and I never turned that thing on.
Yeah, we're going to change the world at 1 o'clock,
Yeah, you want to hear
my
that.
time. Yeah,
Yep.
I'd want to hear
Yeah.
it. As Reagan said one time while testing his microphone, the bombing starts in 12 minutes. He was just being funny, but the
Right.
microphone was on. And people all over the world, I guess, went, "What?" So
I think he
it's
was talking about the journalists, but who knows?
so
Yeah, they're
anyway,
rough.
I turned it on, and whether you agree or disagree, I repeat, is not the issue. The issue was it was billed as a world-changing event. In my pocket was my cell phone, to which all calls uh, that involve me in any way are forwarded. It doesn't make a difference what 800 number you dialed, it rings in my pocket. And I said to Gigi, let's listen for the phone. It was just vibrated in my pocket. I had the bell off, but let's listen for the phone for the next hour or so. And she said, "Why?" I said, "I want the idiots to identify themselves. There's a world changing event, and somebody calls because they want to change my web page. We've looked at your web page and we've seen several mistakes, that type of thing."
Yeah, yeah.
Or just following up on that car sale. What you're saying to me is State of the Union also qualifies for that, the State of the Union address, and numerous other newsworthy things. If the phone rings when your prospect might be watching, a world-changing event, Apollo 13. The whole world was fixated on
I
getting
love
it.
that movie. I do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I remember experiencing it.
I know
I
you
was
did.
in San Francisco. I was standing, getting ready to go up in some office building somewhere, and the doors open. This is before cell phones were either in existence or common. But I'm standing there, and the door opens. They've been in the elevator for a few minutes. I'm out in the free world where I might have known something. And like the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, they all said, "Are they back yet?" They were out of touch for, I don't know how long in an elevator, 3, 4 minutes max, I'm assuming. The whole world was fixated on getting Apollo 13 back
Right.
safely. That's not the time to be making prospect calls. I would have just gone home that day, and just cut off the phones.
Well, when the Twin Towers got hit, I was out running around. I was going out to pay my water bill and I was doing this and that, and I heard it on the radio. I didn't pay my water bill. I was outside the door. I got back in my car and I went home.
Yeah, yeah.
And I stayed there for a while.
And
It
you
was
didn't
too
phone
too
anybody
critical.
about opening up a
No,
podcast, did you?
no. Well, that was before I even had a podcast, but
So anyway,
no,
be
I didn't even
sensitive.
answer the phone. I mean, I took
Yeah,
the phone
that's
off
my
the hook.
point.
I
Yeah.
needed to know what was going on.
I didn't take any of those calls. My shirt buzzed like it does. It's buzzed 10 times since you and I've been on this morning. But I didn't even look at it and don't care. I'm doing this right now. If the president of the United States is doing something world changing, put down the phone, take off the headset, and don't phone anybody, because it makes you look like an insensitive idiot.
Well,
So,
certainly you're unaware and you're not paying attention. And you're right, these tariffs, I don't know how they're going to turn out. I don't have a clue. I have my thoughts about them, but I have to wait and see just like the rest of the world. But it was big, big news. Like
yeah,
you, I just shut everything down and I went out to the living room.
absolutely. And didn't make sale calls and didn't take
No,
sales calls.
no.
So you don't want to, and some of them left voicemails. Most just go away if you don't answer the phone. But some left voicemails, and it was the typical thing, "Hi, I'm just following up on the so and so that we talked about. Did you get my email 30 days ago?" Probably, and 5,000 other ones since then. I haven't been sitting around waiting for your call back. Well, enough on that rant. Let's get into a few of the people on the list of folks. And I've noticed that the list could be 5 times longer and maybe more updated, because one of the neat things I was taught to do, I was talking to a friend of mine, Ray Considine, who wrote Wamish one day. And I said, he was quite a bit older than I was. And I said, "How you doing? Are you still out there kicking it and all?" He said, "Ben, most of the people that I worked with over the years," because he worked on referrals, and he would address a company for the 19th time at their annual convention or something. He said, "Most of the people I work with have retired or died." His
Right.
point
Yeah.
was his business had quieted down because Ray had made the mistake of not keeping his friendships fresh. The people I deal with on a regular basis, I'm guessing their average age is late 30s, 40. Uh, and so I'm not dependent on a 100-year-old person answering the phone and getting me referrals or what have you. And I said all that to say this: almost everyone that I will discuss in the coming weeks, and 3 or 4 of them today, they're all dead, but they're famous. And one of the reasons I want to bring them up is to give, you can't be Dr. Napoleon Hill. You can't be William Penn Patrick. You can't be Earl Nightingale. But that's not bad news. That's good news. They were regular human beings, and you can learn from them, both the good and the bad, and be better than they were. I knew these people up close and personal. Most of them worked for me, if only in seminars and so on, if not full time employees. They worked for me. They stayed at my house. I knew them, warts and all, I guess would be a way to phrase it. And I've never met one that could walk on water. I've met a few that had really strong talents in maybe one area and almost no talents in another. I'll skip down the list to number three, Earl Nightingale.
The
Uh,
voice of
the,
God.
the voice of God
Right.
was a great guy and an intellectual. He read constantly. I used to kid him and say, I don't know when you get any work done, you read all the time. He read incessantly and had that deep voice. He was Sky King on the radio, a syndicated thing, which later went over to television. But Earl was sort of interesting looking, had a big scar on his head from a major operation and so on. So he didn't get to transfer over to television as Sky King. He was the voice of many companies, which is the reason I hired him to be the voice of several of our companies. Just a wonderful human being. The reason he had a partner, Lloyd Conant, it was Nightingale Conant Company, is Earl was not a good businessman. He was a great voice and a great thinker, but I guess the details of business bored him. So the Lloyd Conant, who I have a record here, The Strangest Secret, and on the back cover of the album, it's a 33 and a third or 78 record. On the back, it shows Lloyd Conant as a distributor. He was like a Mary Kay distributor for Earl. Earl had several of them. But Lloyd Conant was also a printer, and he did Earl's printing. Well, Earl was such a bad businessman that he fell behind in his printing bills and was about to be cut off by Lloyd when Lloyd, I assume it was him, I couldn't swear to this, one of them proposed, I think it was Lloyd, an interest in the company in exchange for wiping out the printing debt. So it became Nightingale Conant because Earl couldn't pay his printing bills.
And look where
And,
they are now.
well, it's gone through another transition, yeah, but they went
But
on,
everybody still knows who they are, though.
yeah, went through they went on to become the largest audio video distributors in the world, starting out with just one record, The Strangest Secret. Background
Right.
on that,
Right.
Earl had an insurance agency, and every Saturday morning they would have a sales meeting. And one Saturday he knew in advance he wasn't going to be there. So he wrote out a thing, a message to them. Then he already had that magnificent voice and had already been doing recording. He went into the studio and recorded the Saturday morning sales meeting, a meeting we now know as The Strangest Secret, the largest non-entertainment selling record or recording in history. He wrote it for a Saturday morning sales meeting. And Lloyd Conant and I had sort of a strained relationship because he found out that Earl, after I left Holiday Magic Cosmetics, had offered me the presidency of Nightingale Conant. I don't know what their problem was,
Oh,
if any, but
oh.
word
I hadn't
got
heard
to
that
Lloyd.
before.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
can
turned
see
it
that.
down.
I bet he cut you off his Christmas card list, though.
Yeah, as a Christmas card slowed down. I tell you a great conversation I had with one of the vice presidents. They were both last name Les Davis and Ron Davis, unrelated. Ron called me one day and he said, Ben, I want to get that order going. It was for The Strangest Secret for our worldwide English speaking distributor organization, over 1 million people. Got to get that order going. And the other one was Lead the Field, which was sort of an expanded version of The Strangest Secret. Came in a great big album filled with records. You needed a donkey to carry it around. And I said, well, Ron, we we we're going to launch it. I'm making up dates. We're going to launch it June 1st. I've told you that many times. This was January, February. I've told you that many times. So we're going to do it then. He said, Ben, if you don't place the order now, we won't be here June 1st.
Oh,
They were hanging by a thread.
Oh, yeah.
So you're in your desire, I can never be an Earl Nightingale. Good. If you weren't born with that voice, it got real thin right after that. And a little background thing, one thing always in my mind jumps to another. And Earl mentioned this in a recording. He said that he mentioned Think and Grow Rich. And he said, I really didn't think much of it. It was poorly written. It was simplistic thinking, etc. But one Saturday morning, and I think he even named the day, I don't recall. He said, one Saturday morning, sitting in my study, reading Think and Grow Rich, I came upon the answer, and that made it all worthwhile. It was, you become what you think about. The strangest secret. He got that from Dr. Hill. On the other hand, I've had them both in the house at the same time as weekend guests.
He
Earl
said they
could,
didn't like each other very much.
well, I couldn't say that with Hill because Hill was just a nice Southern gentleman, but
Right.
he must have felt the chill. Earl didn't like him, thought it was beneath his dignity to have to spend time with him. Even though the greatest recording ever made, he got the concept, the nugget directly from Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. So that's Earl Nightingale story, Beltone hearing aids.
I
And,
want you to tell that. Yeah, I wrote it down. We've had that story on here before, but it's the best story. So I'm getting out of your way. Tell the story.
well, let me apologize in advance, but it's not as funny if you don't say it exactly the way Earl said it. Lloyd Conant came to him. He was the voice of Beltone hearing aids to their distributorship or whatever you call them. And so Lloyd came in and said, here's the script Beltone sent in. They want you to read this as the Christmas message we'll put on a record and send to everybody. Earl glanced at the script, and he was one of those one take people. He could read a script, glance at it, and then go in the studio and record it perfectly. So he read it quickly, and he said, "This is a bunch of crap. I'm not reading that," and handed it back to Lloyd. Well, as I said, from time to time, Nightingale Conant had some money issues, and Lloyd said, "You're going to read it, or else we're not going to have a business." Beltone is very important to us. We hadn't joined them yet, so we became their biggest customer by far, not too long after this happened. So Earl looked at it again. There was some more arguing back and forth, and finally Earl agreed and went into the studio and recorded it. His end from Beltone to their distributors at Christmas time. Uh, Earl worked with a guy who, when Earl retired and moved to Arizona, went with him. He was an engineer who was trained to, turn volume up and down and so on. And he had worked with Earl so long and knew that Earl was a one take guy and just rarely, if ever, made a mistake. So as soon as Earl quit talking, he'd hit the end switch and they were done. So he's sitting in his booth thinking about other things probably, and Earl is doing the Beltone hearing a Christmas message, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was things like, Beltone loves you, and the snowflakes of life will fly down this season and land on your shoulders, and know that we here at Beltone love you. And the only thing that makes us happier is reindeer. I mean, it was just one of those goofy things. So he read it, and then at the end, he paused and, knowing his engineer could be trusted, Earl said, Jesus Christ, what a crock of shit.
I've heard it before and I still just lose it.
The engineer saw Earl wasn't talking anymore, cut it off, and they pressed 10,000 of those. You don't see them anymore. They were called flexi records. You could stick them in a magazine, and the magazine could be rolled up. The flexi record was still in there. It was square, but the recorded area was round, so you could put it right on a record player, square, and it wouldn't bang on the corners or anything. And so 10,000 of them are printed. They're trying to sell me on distributing Flexi records for some of our holiday magic messages and for some of the other companies and products. And I said, I don't know. I've seen those in magazines, but they look sort of flimsy. They said they're not. So Ron Davis and Les Davis are in this conference room trying to sell me on the idea. And one of them said, go get those Beltone things are out in the hallway. Go get one of them before the post office goes away with them. So one of them came back with this thing, folded back the cover, stuck it on the record player, and played it. Hello, this is Earl Nightingale, blah, 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 blah. Christmas message, Beltone, so and so, so and so. And with best wishes for the holiday season, this is Earl Nightingale wishing you only the merriest of Christmases. Jesus Christ, what a crock of shit.
Sorry, I can't
On
help it.
on 10,000
I know.
records that are waiting for the postman or the whatever to come get them. They're in the hallway, stacked on a pallet, ready to go. And one of them, Ron or Les Davis, threw his body over the record player like that would make the problem go away. The other one ran outside, threw his body on the pile of 10,000 records ready to go. And then they both wound up in the hallway talking about what they were going to do. And I took the recording on the record player and put it in my briefcase. Weeks later, months later, whatever, we're all having dinner and Earl is there and he's telling the story about how funny it was. And so when he said, thank God they got all of the recordings, he said, I don't even have one. And I said something to the effect of, well, there was one recording that got out of there, the one that was on the record player, and that's in my office in San Rafael, California, Earl. And if you ever mess with me, that will be released. And somewhere, Denise, in
And
this,
you're such a nice man.
yeah,
How could
somewhere
you
in
do
this
that to Earl?
office, somewhere in this office or in the house, there is somewhere, I haven't seen it in years, there is Earl Nightingale's Beltone Christmas recording. And I've told people, don't tear up the office looking for it, but if you ever see it, a Flexi record, do not throw it away or stick it, bring it to me. There will be a reward. But I've
You
been
need a
waiting.
museum with all the stuff that
Yeah.
you've managed to amass over the years. That's one of my favorite stories. What did he look at you and go, I'm gonna kill you? What did he,
Well, he
what was
had
his
the, he
reaction?
had the most wonderful sardonic sense of humor. You had to really listen to him because he's about half the jokes or funny things he'd say went over the heads of the listeners. They didn't know he was kidding. But I was raised in a family of humorous, sarcastic people. So I got on to him pretty quick. After I got over I'm sitting here with Earl Nightingale, oh my God. And then I found out he was a struggling businessman like the rest of us.
Right, right. And I don't think, I know when people decide that they're going to hero worship somebody other than John Wayne, I'm okay with that. But he's the best. But they're people, what is that old saying? They put their pants 1 foot at a time. I mean, one leg at a time.
Yeah,
It's the same thing.
just regular folks.
Regular folks. And I know we wanted to talk about this, but I'll mention it now so we can bring it up next week because we're just about out of time. But one of the questions that we have came from somebody. It says, for someone who's struggling with closing a sale, what's the first thing they should focus on improving in their approach? And you brought up some of it. It's like get the objection out of the way. But what else should they focus on?
Well, when you're wondering how you're going to close the sale, it's too late because
Oh, okay.
you should have figured out how to set it up to start with. In Sales Infiltration in the book, Closers Part 2, page 257, buried in those pages, it tells you to set the table. In other words, explain to the customer how it works, what's going to happen, et cetera, in advance so there aren't any surprises. In other words, when you ask for the order, they shouldn't go, oh, I didn't know you were going to ask for the order. You told them that 30 minutes ago. So you first set the table, and then what you do. I cheat. I have an 86% closing rate, and I've been at this at a high level since 1965. What is that, 35, 45, 50? I'm in my 60th year of
Hmm.
making big money in selling.
Right. It
And
can be done. Everybody, you hear that? It can be
yeah,
done.
as Bill Patrick used to say, if he can do it, anyone can do it. Uh, but one of the little secrets, and this didn't come on me day one, I had to go through the hoops like anybody else. I was a high school graduate, full of myself, and didn't think I had to learn scripts or anything else. I was perfect as I entered the sales world, and then I quickly figured out I didn't know anything. But over the years, I figured this out. Sell a quality product or service that is competitively priced. Doesn't have to be the cheapest, but it has to be competitively priced so you can explain the difference and spend your time talking to people qualified to buy it. I always use the thing oil tankers. If I'm selling oil tankers, I probably should call on people who are in the business of shipping oil, or at least in the shipping business, or at least in the oil business. Going to my next door neighbor here in Placerville, California, and trying to sell him or her an oil tanker is a total waste of time and energy. That's not prejudging. I just, looking at him mowing the yard and the sign on the side of his truck tells me that he's not going to buy an oil tanker. So you do
No.
that. Meanwhile, you become a person of class, quality, and substance with the ability, and that comes from reading to a large extent and meeting interesting people and going to the seminars and taking notes. You become a person of class, quality, and substance with the ability to subtly project that. You don't say, "Hi, I'm a person of class, quality, and substance." You conduct yourself as if you were. You say and do the things a person of class, quality, and substance would do. And then you learn, step three, then you learn how the most effective way to present your product. I always give the example of Wall Street Journal. They've been sending out the same control letter for, I think it's, I've lost track, 40, 50 years. On a spring day, 25 years ago, two young men graduated from whatever, Yale, Harvard, whatever. And then it goes on to say one is now the CEO of a company and the company they're both in by coincidence, and the other one is stuck in middle management. And then they go on to imply that the only significant difference between the two, they're the same age, same education, same company, was one read the Wall Street Journal every day and the other one didn't. It's a masterfully written letter. It's been going out for 40 or 50 years. Legend has it that they've only changed a word or two, maybe in the first year, a sentence here or there. And they run other offers, other letters all the time, trying to find one that will beat that control piece. 40, 50 years, they haven't found it. So you find the most effective way to present your product or service, and then you stick to it. People say, well, I don't like scripts. If you've ever been to the movie, you just mentioned John Wayne. When you go to a John Wayne movie, you weren't sitting there going, "Oh, he's reading a script. That was written by somebody else." He was so good at delivering it, you thought it was John Wayne. You thought John Wayne was a cowboy. You thought John Wayne was the baddest person on earth because he was an actor. Salespeople are actors. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that they know how to effectively present what they're selling. Someone once said the only difference between a con, oh, it was J. Douglas Edwards quoting from the book. The only difference between a con man and a salesman is belief in product. And that's to a large degree, that's true because the techniques are the same. We didn't get to Charlie Manson on the list today, but we will.
Hmm.
Or
Yeah,
first
that's a
time I,
fascinating one.
yeah, first time I visited Charlie Manson at San Quentin in his cell, he'd asked to meet me because he could see me coming and going once a week teaching my classes. I walk in his cell. The only book he had only book. He didn't have the Gideon Bible, and everybody had that because they hand them out for free. The only book he had was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And I said, Charlie, what an interesting choice of a book. He said, yeah, it's my Bible. And he went on to say, I could not have built the Manson family without it. So
Now,
you
aren't
can,
we sorry he ever learned how to read?
yeah, yeah, yeah. He almost didn't. He wasn't a great intellect.
No,
He was
no.
just evil, and he had stumbled across how you get people to do what you want them to do. So anyway, that's a little bit of rambling, but we've touched on Earl Nightingale instead of the bunch I intended to. And next week, let's talk about Napoleon Hill, perhaps, and William Penn Patrick,
Yeah.
and Dr.
I love,
Norman Vincent Peale. That'll be
ooh,
my goal.
I like those. And I do have, and we can talk about this too. I'll mention it now, but you've mentioned in past episodes that mastering sales is a continuous journey. And the question that came to me was what books outside of the closers, obviously, resources or habits would you and Ben recommend to those looking to stay ahead in the sales game? Well, you're already ahead of the game. You're listening to us now. So that's one way. But we'll cover that a little bit more in either next week or the week after. But thank you for the question, and we will get to it, I promise.
Well, bless you. As always, it's a joy chatting with you, and you make me think of so many things I haven't thought of in years.
I don't even know what to think about that. So I'm going to tell people very quickly where they can find the closers because I started out saying you've got to have these books. They need to be part of your sales entrepreneurial library. So where can they get those before I reluctantly let you go?
If you want them signed, dated, with an unconditional lifetime money back guarantee, special pricing, and free shipping, there's one place to go. Go to stores, STORES dot eBay .com/, and this is all one word, Ronzoni Books, RONZONEBOOKS. If you order before 2 o'clock Pacific time, it'll go out that day and you'll have it in short order. And I recommend I recommend the entire Closer series, which is growing on a weekly basis. And we're up to Closers 7 is being finished up now. But to start with, at least get the Closers parts 1 and 2. They are the foundations of modern selling.
Got it. Okay, so did I'm sorry, I was coughing and I wasn't paying attention. Did you give the Ronzoni books? Did you give that yet?
I did.
Okay.
It's really comforting to know how closely you listen to me.
I knew I set myself up for that, and
As the
I,
words were coming out of your mouth, you said, I never should have let him
I
know.
should have never done that. But I that's okay. I just smacked myself with, I'm knocking on wood that I won't do it again, which means I'm hitting my knuckles on my forehead. So, well, listen, everybody, thank you so much for being with us each week and get the books. Honestly, go get the books. Send us your questions. We love to have them. And if you have any questions at all, mostly for Ben, but if you got questions, you can find him on LinkedIn. I mean, we are easy to locate. Just go to yourpartnerinsuccessradio.com and you'll see this podcast, the Closers Inner Circle podcast, popping up on every Wednesday. And we're on Apple, we're on Amazon, we're on Audible, we're everywhere. You can find us wherever you can download and listen. There's nothing to watch on YouTube, but you can hear us on YouTube. But we look forward to meeting up with you again next week. And Ben, thank you.
Thank you, dear. Have a wonderful day.
I'm fixing to.